Bienvenidos a esta presentación del pretérito contra el imperfecto. This presentation will talk about the differences between the preterite and the imperfect, which are both tenses in the past tense of Spanish. It will discuss specific situations to use one versus the other. For this presentation, everything that has to do with the preterite is on the left side of the screen, and everything that has to do with the imperfect will be on the right side of the screen. The preterite is used when an action happened once or was repeated a specific number of times in the past tense. Compré mi primer coche después de graduarme means that I bought my first car after graduating, and that of course can only happen once. Buying your first car happens one time. I jumped rope 20 times is a specific number which requires the preterite tense. The imperfect is used when an action happened habitually or it happened an undetermined number of times. I played with blocks when I was a boy. Jugaba is the imperfect because playing with blocks was habitual and we don't have a determined number of times that we played with the blocks. You rode your bike many times. Many times is an undetermined number. Actions that occurred at or during a specific time are actions that require the preterite. If you played tennis at 3:30, that's a specific time that you played tennis, and that's going to require the preterite tense, jugué. Cuando vi el accidente, llamé la policía means that you called the police when you saw the accident. That's a specific occurrence. Versus a progressive action that was ongoing for an indefinite period of time, or an action that was interrupted by another action. In this first example, I was reading my book when my mom called. I was reading my book is an action that was in progress. It is the action that was interrupted, which requires the imperfect. Leía mi libro cuando mi mamá me llamó. Mientras íbamos al parque me caí tells us that while we were going to the park, I fell. The action that was in progress while we were going is in the imperfect. Please note that in both of these examples, the action that is the interruption, my mom called, and I fell are in the preterite tense. The main action or event is going to be the preterite. Hacía mucho viento cuando me caí tells us that it was very windy when I fell. The main event of this sentence, the main action, is the fact that I fell. That is in the preterite. En el baile, Miguel habló con Rosa says that at the dance, Miguel spoke with Rosa. That is the main event or action of this sentence, and that is in the imperfect. That is in the preterite tense. The background of a main action, or the circumstances behind a main action, are going to be the imperfect. Some specific examples of this are when you are talking about the time and the weather, those are going to be expressed with the imperfect. When you talk about someone's age or their outward or physical appearance, that is the imperfect. Telling me that someone was 30 years old and that the man was tall are not events. Descriptions are going to use the imperfect. To talk about how someone felt, to talk about beliefs or emotional states, are the imperfect because those aren't, again, actual events that happened. Estaba triste y estaba cansado tells us that he or she was sad and tired. To talk about someone's health, we're going to use the imperfect. The next two slides are going to talk about signals. These are the preterite signals. These signals are going to be used primarily with the preterite tense. In every sentence that we've seen as an example, there was something in the sentence that gave away whether we needed the preterite or the imperfect. El año pasado, for example, is a clue that we need to use a preterite because something happened last year. A specific time, again, requires the preterite tense. El 2 de septiembre and el sábado can be replaced with any date or day, but as soon as you put a specific day or date on something, it's going to need the preterite tense. There are more signals for the preterite, but these are some that you may come across in your studies. These are some of the imperfect signals that you may come across. All of these signals tell us that something happened frequently, habitually, but none of these say that something happened a specific number of times or just once. Again, if it's a specific number or if something happened one time, it's a preterite, but if it's an undetermined number of times, we're going to use the imperfect. Practiquemos. Simply write whether each sentence requires the preterite or the imperfect based on the situation. First, I'll provide the word preterite or imperfect next to each sentence. After I've gone through all of the examples, I will then provide the correct conjugation if you'd like to practice the conjugation. My dad was 45 years old requires the imperfect because we're telling someone's age. It is not an event. Last night I studied requires a preterite because of the words last night. I bought it at 6 o'clock requires a preterite because we did something at a specific time. It was sunny out describes the weather, not an actual event, so we need the imperfect. Since you always played video games, it's imperfect. There is no determined number of times you played video games here. Last Monday is our signal that we need the preterite to talk about eating dinner. If we describe the personality of the boys as being nice, that's not an event, not a specific event, that is, so we are going to use the imperfect. To talk about someone's health, the imperfect is needed. Suddenly is one of our preterite signals that something happened one time. And finally, since they ran twice yesterday, there's a specific number with this event, so the preterite is required. Here are the conjugations of the verbs that are underlined in both the preterite and imperfect forms. Gracias por ver esta presentación y te deseo mucho éxito.